What is up, everybody? It is Drew, Travel of the Burning Abyss, here with another video, and the results are in. The Exosister deck did win the poll for the video I'm posting this week. Hopefully within the next week or two I will have the Burning Abyss profile up. I just have to wait for some stuff to show up in the mail. But we have Exosister today, so we're going to be going in depth talking about this deck and what it does, and yeah, hopefully influencing some people to pick it up as a meta counter. It did top 32 the YCS from this past weekend, but let's be realistic, it was only one spot out of the top 32, and Tier Limit had 17 spots, Sprite had 9. And then there were 3 Fluanderies, and then I think just the 3 lone single decks, the 1 Exosister, the 1 Dragon Link, and the 1 Thunder Dragon. But yeah, let's go ahead and jump into deck profile. Before we do, obviously, smash the subscribe button, turn the notification bell on so I upload more cool and awesome content just like the video you're watching right now. And obviously, a thumbs up is always appreciated. But let's go ahead and dive into this week's deck profile. All right, so we're going to start off with the main deck per usual. We have 3 copies of Exosister Martha. Essentially, if you only control XYZ monsters, or if you control no monsters at all, you special it from your hand. And if you do, you special summon an Exosister Alice from your deck. And it does lock you into Exosister monsters, which is fine. Like, that's perfectly fine. And then it has another effect that if a card moves out of either graveyard except during the damage step, you can special summon from your extra deck 1 Exosister XYZ monster using this face-up card you control as a material, and it is treated as an XYZ summon, so that's pretty cool. And it's got, like, honestly, I know it doesn't sound amazing, but it does have decent stats considering what the rest of the deck has. Then we play 3 copies of Exosister Stella. This is basically like a Goblinberg. You special summon an Exosister monster from your hand, which is pretty cool. And then if you control Exosister Alice, you gain 100 life points. So that's kind of neat. Then it does have the ability of, if your opponent moves a card or cards out of either graveyard, you could do the XYZ summon, similar to Martha's. So yeah, that's kind of important. Then we have 3 copies of Alice, which playing 3 of this is very important, especially considering Martha's summoning condition does get your Alice out onto the board, so maxing out on this is actually important. But basically, it also says if you control an Exorcist monster, you can special summon it from your hand. And then if you control Stella, you gain 800. So that's actually pretty cool. And then it has a similar effect to Stella, where if your opponent moves a card from either graveyard, you get to XYZ summon an Exosister using it as a XYZ material. Then I play 2 copies of Sophia and 1 copy of Irene. So the Sophia says that, you know, if you control the Exosister, draw a card, and if you control Irene, you gain 800 life points, which is cool. Doesn't come up all the time, but it can come up. The only problem that you'll see with Sophia is that it does have a draw ability, and we do play Prosperity. So occasionally they will kind of interfere with each other, but it's not super often that happens. And honestly, I would prioritize the Prosperity over the Sophia draw in my personal opinion, so that's worth noting. Additionally, it has similar ability to the other Exosister effects with the XYZ summoning, which we can already figure out there's a trend here with this deck. It's almost like it impacts decks that do things to the graveyard. And then we'll move on to Exosister Irene, which basically says you can place an Exosister card from your hand on the bottom of the deck and draw a card. And if you control Sophia, you gain 800 life points. Irene is probably the least used out of all the Exosisters. Obviously has the same effect of XYZ summoning. But yeah, Irene is just the worst out of all of them. Sophia's not bad. I wanted to play 3, but there's just no room for 3 with the ratios that I have. And I think the other ratios of cards that I'm playing are much more important than, you know, playing a 3rd Sophia. But moving on to the hand traps now. we have 3 copies of the best hand trap currently in the game, and that is 3 Dimension Shifter. This deck does not need its graveyard at all, so the fact that you can just make your opponent's turn do nothing is actually very important. So yeah, 3 D Shifter is actually fantastic. 3 copies of Ash because it's generic. You are going to play against branded decks, so I guess it's really good against branded fusion. It's just a generic thing that can also hurt rogue decks. So yeah, I think 3 Ash is more than fine. 3 Ghost Mourner and Moonlit Chill. This card says discard. It doesn't say send from hand to graveyard. So because it's a discard, you can play it under D-Shifter, and it burns your opponent, which with the way this format is going, every single person's turn is ridiculously long, like to the point where I could take a nap and their turn would still be going on by the time my nap was over. So yeah, I want to burn them so they can't play the game, and they just run themselves into time, and I win on time because that's what you have to do to put these decks in check at this point. Then 3 copies of Imperm because it's one of the best hand traps in the game. Your opponent won't be able to activate a Talents if you use this because obviously Talents has to be a monster effect to go off. But if you use Imperm, it's not a monster effect, so they can't use their Talents. Moving on to the spell cards, we have 3 copies of Exosister packs and 1 copy of Armament. So it's basically going to let you XYZ summon, which is pretty cool. And Pax is going to be your searcher. If you open up combo plus Pax, you just search for like a trap that you're missing or something. So yeah, I'm not going to go super in depth with these because I feel like it's pretty simple to understand what's going on here. Basically, it's an XYZ summon on your opponent's turn, and it's a search. Then we have 3 copies of Prosperity, which I mentioned just a little while ago in the video. This card is fantastic. You don't need to have all 15 of your extra deck cards in circulation at once. You can definitely afford to banish anywhere from 3 to 6 of them throughout the game. So yeah, Prosperity is pretty good. Then I'm actually playing 3 Dark Ruler because we want to board break this format, and I think that it's important to be able to do something like that, and Dark Ruler does allow you to get there. This card is fantastic, being able to go ahead and just shut your opponent's board off. I wasn't super fond of this prior to Darkwing Blast, but post Darkwing Blast, I think this card is amazing, so definitely play it. And the last spell is, of course, one Called By, which in this deck is basically just a God card. So, yeah, got to play the Called By. Moving on to the traps, we just play 3 copies of Vadis and 2 copies of Returnia. So Vadis is going to be your special summon from deck, which is absolutely crazy because you can do it. You could chain it in response to some of your opponent's activations in grave, and then you can do your XYZ summons after, which is disgusting. And then Returnia is pretty neat. Essentially, it's going to let you XYZ summon an Exosister monster using monsters you control. Or, if you already XYZ summon this turn, banish a card your opponent controls, which is obviously pretty good. This deck does have a very interesting dynamic where you're going to be paying and gaining 800 life points fairly frequently. So, in time, you definitely can pull out some interesting wins. So keep that in mind because it will come up, and you have to also make sure that you don't burn yourself in time either. So yeah, you got to kind of gauge things and figure out what works best. But that is the entirety of the main deck. We're going to go ahead and jump on over to the extra deck now and see what monsters we're XYZ summoning. All right, so it is now extra deck time. You know, the extra deck, in my opinion, is pretty basic and standard for what I think this extra deck should look like. So we're playing 3 Exosister, Michaelis, or Michaelis, however you want to pronounce it. Essentially, the turn that it's XYZ summoned, you can banish a card, which is kind of crazy. You could banish, your opponent can either control it or it could be in their grave, which is actually nuts. There are a few other things that are important to note. It can't be destroyed by battle with a monster summoned from the graveyard, which obviously is fantastic. So, and then additionally, you can detach material from it to add an Exosister spell or trap from your deck to your hand. So, yeah, this card has so many effects in one card. Like, it's disgusting how many effects there are in just one monster. So yeah, you got to play 3 of this. It's your main Exosister that you're going to be making a lot of the time. We play 2 copies of Caspatel. So Caspatel, essentially same thing, can't be destroyed, you know, by battle with a monster summoned from the graveyard, which is obviously important to note, something to keep track of all the time. And if it's XC summoned using an Exosister monster, neither you or your opponent can summon from the graveyard for the rest of the turn, which is actually super important. And then the last effect, you can detach material from this card and add Exosister monster from your deck to your hand. So like sometimes you open up 2 Exosisters that get you into like a rank 4. You make this and then you search for your Martha and then you just go off with Martha. So yeah, it's actually a really good starter here. Then we play 1 copy of Jabreen and 1 copy of Asophiel. So Jabreen essentially says that it can't be destroyed by activated effects of monsters summoned from the graveyard. So not the battle one, but it's, you know, effects, so that's kind of good. Also, you know, you can only use each of the following effects once per turn. If you control this card, there's an XYZ summon this turn by using an Exosister monster's material. Target an effect monster your opponent controls, negate its effects until the end of this turn. It's obviously pretty cool. And then you can detach material from this card, and for this turn, all XYZ monsters you control gain 800 attack. So yeah, that's actually really good. Even if it leaves the field, they'll still get that gain. So keep that in mind. And then as for Asophiel, can't be destroyed by activated effects, same as the Jabreen effect. And then obviously it has 2 other effects, just like all the other ones. If it was XYZ summon using Exosister, neither player can activate card effects in the graveyard this turn. It's actually really, really cool and very important to do. And then you detach material, target a monster your opponent controls, and return to the hand. So yeah, that's not bad. They honestly have some of the best XYZ monster effects that I've ever seen printed. And then we do play 2 copies of Magnifica. You're going to be making this using 2 of your Exosister XYZ monsters. That's kind of a neat condition. So it has to be XYZ summoned that way too. You can't XYZ summon it by other ways, which is important. It can also make a second attack during each battle phase, which if you can attack your opponent direct, that's 5,600. That's crazy. Once per turn, it also has a quick effect where you can detach a material from it and banish 1 card your opponent controls. That's actually really crazy too. And when your opponent activates a card or effect, you can return the XYZ monster you own that is attached to this card from your to your extra deck, and then you special summon that monster from your extra deck on top of this using it as a material. So you can trigger all of your effects of your Exosister monsters that trigger when they're XYZ summoned. So this card is disgusting, absolutely disgusting. Definitely play it if you're not playing it already. Then the other rank 4s, we play 1 Cowboy for time because it will come up. 1 Abyss Dweller because like graveyard decks, obviously. 1 Utopia the Lightning, or Utopia and 1 Utopia the Lightning. These are here because you're going to have some decks that are just like Towers decks and you have to beat over them, and this gets the job done. We play 1 copy of Zeus because Zeus is Zeus, but in this format, it's not fantastic against something like Tier Limit, obviously. So you might side it out a decent amount of the time. So yeah, that's kind of important to note. But the card is still really good against a lot of other decks. And then we play 1 copy of Lina because it gets us out of weird situations, especially with Ibli being a card. You can link off Ibli and 1 of your Exosister monsters into this, and then, you know, at least be out of your Ibli lock. So yeah, that's pretty important. That, however, does bring the profile to a conclusion for the extra deck. So now we're going to hop on over to the side deck and see what we side against the meta. So let's take a look at what our side deck looks like. All right, so as you can see already on top of the side deck, we do have a card that is definitely important to be side decking now, and that is 3 copies of Ghost Sister and Spooky Dogwood. This goes hand in hand with your Ghost Mourner and Moonlit Chill, because now you're going to be hitting your opponent for damage and you're going to be gaining life, all the while they're trying to combo off and get out of a really weird board state. And you're just gonna wreck house, like completely wreck house, because they're gonna go into time and you're just gonna win on time. So you got to do it. You got to do it. Then we have 3 copies of Cosmic Cyclone and 3 copies of Lightning Storm. Additionally, I'm gonna slide these over a bit so you can see the additionally part. Additionally, we do play 3 copies of Evenly. So the reason that I'm playing these 9, obviously the Cosmic is really good against Runic. It's really good against Mine, all this other stuff. But the Lightning Storm and the Evenly can be used against a lot of decks. It's not just one deck, it's multiple. So because of that, I think it's important to play both to just break boards apart more easily. You can always Dark Ruler them, and then Evenly, you Dark Ruler them Lightning Storm, so on and so forth. So obviously, they're also good against back row decks. So if you do end up playing against a good chunk of back row decks, you now have 9 cards to side in against it. So it's very versatile, very, very versatile. I think these cards are actually super important. And lastly, we play 3 copies of D-Barrier. I do have 3 copies of Spellbound, and I thought about playing it, but like I can chain D-Barrier to the activation of an effect, and then like what are they gonna do? Like if they activate a tier limit card in graveyard, I can chain Call Fusion. Now they don't get the summon. So I think that's a little bit better because it completely prevents them from putting a body on board. So I think that that's actually very, very strong. So yeah, 3D barrier I think is a must. That, however, does bring the profile to a conclusion as a whole. We have now looked at our main deck, our extra deck, and our side deck, and seen just exactly what I'm playing. Hopefully this was pretty informative for some people thinking about picking up the deck. I think the deck does have a good amount of potential going forward. I think that obviously there are some things that are going to be difficult to deal with for anyone, especially the tier limit matchup. That deck is absolutely crazy right now. Shout outs to Chris LeBlanc for winning YCS Minneapolis with his tier limit Sprite deck. That's his 4th YCS win, so shout out to him. I've played against him once in the entirety of me playing Yu-Gi-Oh! I think he's a Boston kid, and I'm from Connecticut, so not too far off. But that basically wraps up the video. Hopefully everybody enjoyed it, and you can give it a thumbs up, smash the subscribe button, and turn the notification bell on. And for right now, this is Drew, Traveler of the Burning Abyss, signing out.